5 minutes early. I thought it was at 6.
Nope.
No, we're not starting.
Well, wait a minute now.
Thank you, Steve.
That's the last I heard. And I haven't had packets in 2 weeks, so I was assuming we're still at 6.
Are we all set?
We're never at 6.
Okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting for the School District of Waukesha. Today is Monday, July 7th, 2014. Lori, would you please verify that the meeting's been properly posted?
Yes, it has been.
Okay, thank you. And this evening, Kurt O'Brien is excused. He's on business out of the country at this time. I believe he should be at the full board meeting though, so.
It's correct.
We will see him Wednesday evening. This time, we'd like to offer our citizens an opportunity to speak. Is there anyone that would like to address the committee? Seeing none, we will move forward into our action items. We have one action item tonight, and that is the approval of the monthly vouchers. Joe, what calls did we have on the vouchers?
And regarding the June check vouchers, we had four questions. First of all, there was a question on a payment to the city of Waukesha for $8,993, and that was for police supervision for the first quarter of 2014, and for two of the schools, West and South. It was for their basketball games and two of their dances. And then North's also had a police supervision invoice, but it was paid on July 2nd. It was just paid about a week later than those other two invoices. So that was the question on why we had West and South and not North. It was just a timing difference.
Okay.
Then the next one was for a $36,000 payment to Stephanie Harvey Consulting, and that's a professional service fee for a literacy initiative for grades 6 through 12. It's a 50% deposit, and the professional development will be at the district's secondary 3-day summer literacy institute and ongoing professional development throughout the 14-15 school year.
Okay, and that should be, so we should be hitting that hard pretty soon then with
Yes.
the professional development this coming up this summer?
It's our biggest initiative of the year. That's,
Okay.
And then the next question was regarding a $5,368 invoice for Santa Care, and that was for vacuum bags and vacuums and equipment parts and supplies and floor covering. And so that totaled $5,368 for about 6 or 7 different categories of vacuum parts and supplies.
So those were just routine, not for a special project or something that
No.
happened where we needed to?
No, it was just routine. They're like the vacuum pad, the 36 floor applicator pads, they went into inventory and they're wrecked out as needed. And so are some of the other supplies in relation to that. Then the final invoice was for $2,143 to Simplex Grinnell, and that consisted of 2 trip charges to hire for their fire alarm system and replacement of parts in the system.
Was that incapacitated to some degree, or was it just old and we needed to replace it?
Well,
or-
there was just one board that needed to be replaced. They called it a slave board that needed to be replaced in the fire panel.
Okay. Obviously, we need
Yes,
our schools to be safe, so just was wondering what was going on there.
yes.
Okay. Other questions that we have of the vouchers? Mr. Edlin?
Thank you, Mr. Cole. I just have one comment. When we review the voucher reports, a lot of times under the function, it says Office of the Principal, but it doesn't tell us what school, just so we have an idea of, kind of what we're doing with some of the money at that school, who requested it, that sort of thing. Maybe if we could put a little notation on their office of whatever school it is, principal. I don't know if there's enough room to,
Say, the system generates that, the office of the principal comes from the function 241.
Okay.
So what you're asking is what's the location? And
Yeah.
we would have to see if we can fill in another descriptor that would indicate that as a
Well,
breakdown.
you have used the comment field, but not consistently. So that's where I was looking, is in the comment field, you can see what school, but you're not necessarily consistent with it all the time. At least that's what I thought.
Well, the reason I question this is,
Because I had the same question, I'd see it over and over, and then it's like, oop, I'd have to
Right.
slide over to the next column for the comment, but it's not always there, Steve, you're
right,
you're
and the reason I brought that up is I noticed in this month's voucher report that, I don't know if this is one location or several locations. If it's one location, we've got a principal who's going on a spending spree for new office furniture like crazy, a $1,500 leather sofa.
If you want to give me the check number, I can,
That would be, my little eyes to focus on this. My old eyes, I should say.
I got trifocals.
You can borrow glasses.
That's $1,200 leather sofa, sorry about that. I guess it would be totaled, and see, that's part of the problem that I have in this, is it's not broken up because it's all under Amazon credit plan. You know, so I guess the check number is probably at the total of the Amazon credit plan bill that was paid. Let's see, Amazon, I can give you a page number. 461. This Amazon credit plan, I'm not real crazy about the way we're doing this, because it's hard to see where the money's being spent, just because it's all going to one vendor, but several people are purchasing on that. So the total for that check, which apparently it's 284528. Oh, I can blow that up, I forgot about that, that's so nice.
It's nice, isn't it?
$18,697, but there's so many charges to that thing that we have no idea, you know, where the money is actually being spent, or,
well, we actually do, but
okay.
you have to be able to translate. So if you look at the
Numbers.
account number,
Mm-hmm.
so you see a lot of them start 10E, and then the next three
60.
digits are the location,
The 411, like 411, 450?
prior to the 411.
Right before that.
Oh, okay.
So,
454, 131, 231, on and on.
right, so if it starts with a 1, it's an elementary school. If
Okay.
it starts with a 4, it's high school. And if it starts with a 2, it's a middle school.
Okay, so it's a high school.
So, and then each school has their unique number. So 453 is south.
Oh,
South, okay.
I think it's-
But not in alphabetical order, and it throws me every time. It's,
I think it's north.
I think you're right, I think it is north.
North?
North.
Okay. And so, if it says office of the principal, I'm assuming that the principal is authorizing these purchases?
It means it's being charged to the school's building allocation. And yes, a principal would certainly authorize those.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
so that goes against the building's allocation, not site funds?
It is site
Site
funds.
It is site fund, they're one and
Yeah.
the same.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
Does the administration review the site fund budgets every year? In other words, was this an item that was, were these items budgeted for this?
They don't budget individual items. They budget categories.
So are we on a spending spree at the end of the year?
They have carryover, so there's no reason for them to do that.
Okay,
That's the specific reason we have that carryover, so we don't have that. I mean, so
Yeah.
we make sure they know they have carryover, so
Mm-hmm.
purchases should all not be based on time of the year.
okay.
Yeah, we don't want to have the, you lose it if you don't spend
Right.
it kind of
Right.
mentality. And that, we took on quite a long time ago, actually,
Okay.
for sites to allow for carryover.
Yeah, I understand furniture gets wore out and whatnot and needs to be updated and replaced to keep it professional looking. But I'm a little surprised that we don't budget in the site fund.
I don't,
Do we just
Define
set up a
site
general
fund.
budget? If somebody says, hey, you know, I'd like to replace all this office furniture in here, do they set that up as just, you know, a category within
Well-
their budget before they send it to the administration? Because we
It-
we
it-
never
it-
really see those
It
site
could be
budgets.
something as simple as, you know, a booster club donating that. That might be for an area, for example, high schools have a number of student areas where they can go and study.
Right.
And they're trying to make it a little more user-friendly. Some of that could be donated to the school, which would then likely go through that particular account. So
Yeah.
the only way to change that, obviously, would be to break out those accounts separately and show items purchased with donated dollars. I don't know if that was the case here, but that is the
A lot of
case
these are
in a
going
lot
to
of
the
these.
media center. If I glance at some of the other that have
Yeah.
more involved descriptions,
Sure,
and I
and
think
I-
they're just upgrading their media center
Yeah,
furniture.
I'd understand that. When it just says office of the principal, it's so generalized. We don't, I mean, we have to make an assumption on things like that. And I'd not prefer not to make an assumption if we had just a little bit more detailed information for the media center, you know, or some media center remodeling, just something, a little bit better descriptor,
Sure.
so that we can have an idea of, you know, where the money's actually being allocated to.
And I have to be honest, sometimes I don't know where they're putting it.
Okay,
You know, we only have as much information as they provide to us.
yeah. Where's the oversight in these site budgets? I mean, do
It's
we?
with the principal.
Okay, but it comes to the board as part of the budget process every year. But we really don't scrutinize those site funds at all.
Well, that's not entirely true. I mean, they are subject to audit, annual audit. And if we're aware of something, if someone in the business office has a concern or sees a purchase order that's not correct, I mean, I haven't brought to my attention, you know, on a infrequent basis, but it does happen.
But should we not, as a board who has to approve the budget every year, see how we're budgeting the money that's to be spent?
Well, there's an assumption there that it stays in the categories that it originally starts in. And I can tell you, they move dollars where they need them.
Yeah,
So they may start out with a large general supplies budget, but as the year goes on, we require them to put the dollars to where the appropriate expenditure is. So if it happens to be furnishings, then they have to transfer it into a furnishings account.
okay. And that's all good and well, but again, as a board, we're gonna start discussing the budget tonight, and we really don't see these site budgets, that component of the budget, to see, you know, where money's been allocated, and if they need to shift it from one place to another, we do that regularly, every year. But we just don't know what they're budgeting the money for. And we're approving a budget without knowing what the money's being budgeted for. So I don't know that we,
And we can give you broad categories, but that's still not going to tell you if they are going to buy replacement furniture for their library.
that's what budgeting's all about. If you know you're gonna replace that furniture, you wanna do the remodeling center, we ask that of Glenn every year. You know, facilities has a budget, they have projects set up that they're gonna target for the next year. You know, I just think we need a little bit more information in this area, because we don't know it, you don't know it, you know.
Well, and a lot of times, it's not, up front, they don't plan to replace the furniture. They get through close to the end of the year, they realize they've got money left over, they've met all their obligations, and they want to start doing, you know, some of those furniture replacements. And then they move the dollars into the areas where they need them. But they don't start the year with that plan in mind.
Right. Do they have any plan in mind? I mean, other than saying we last year we used, I don't know, $30,000 worth of cleaning supplies, we know we got a budget of $31,000.
Well, they have department budgets. I mean, they
Right.
take their site budget and break it down by departments and so on.
Yeah, I also know that sometimes, like I recall when South started up the AVID program, they had to dip into their site funds to help with that. And that went across a couple of years. That was a project that started in one year. They didn't have enough money to do all the things that they wanted to do, and so they spread it across multiple years. So it wasn't even a concept in the beginning of the year to have it in there, but it was something that came along. They did their research. They said, hey, this seems to make sense. And then they started in on that program. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why, too, we have the carryover is sometimes projects go beyond 1 year, and you have to break it up into multiple years. Or you want to say, look, we don't want to spend monies in other categories this year because we know we're going to have a bigger expenditure. But in that case, that would be planning. That would be an example of planning.
Yeah.
So I think some of the items are planned for while others, you know, aren't.
Okay.
I think you're absolutely right with that.
Yeah.
I guess the question would be, what are you looking for?
Well,
I mean, do you want to see,
I would
have
like
a
to see,
I have a little experience in the budgeting process in the school, and I know that the principals usually come up with a, you know, a framework of a budget. They don't necessarily hit that or usually come under it, but,
right,
I mean, is that what you're interested in?
Yeah.
You want to see what North is, what their preliminary budget looks like? What are they going to spend this on, this on, and this on?
exactly,
How much money
yeah,
are they allocated a year and where they're spending it?
right, yep,
Yeah, because the
Is
allocation.
that possible to get
The
that?
allocations are in the budget. There's a page that shows how, total dollars,
Right.
and you want to see each school broken down on where those
Yeah, I
dollars.
have no idea how much each school is getting, and then,
Sure, we can
Where's
do that
this-
for August.
Where's the summary page? Where's the roll-up page?
It is on page 9. So we can take that information and break it down.
At least
by-
you have the categories, right? You said that you have the
We can do it by
categorical.
function, we can do it by object. They build a budget just,
Right.
they have all the
Right.
individual line items.
Yeah.
I can drill as deep as you want to go.
yeah, well, I, just as, you know,
Want an overview?
yeah, kind of an overview of what they spend the money on, because we're not approving it, but yet we're approving the general budget. So you know, it's just as a, just like we approve the vouchers and we're approving the checks every month, but some of this stuff, I have no idea where, you know, where it's coming from and where it's going. You know, so just an oversight and an overview so that we have some idea of what we're approving, because we're approving blindly, and I'm not comfortable with that.
Page 9,
9.
it has a summary of each school, has the,
Page 9 under summary?
no, just page 9 in, you know, sequential order.
Todd, did she have my binder in her office, maybe?
Oh, I don't know, I'll go check.
Thank you, I
We can,
appreciate
we
it.
can share too. So we're showing the enrollment, we have the enrollment, and then we have the last year's budget and this year's budget total. And I think all Steve is asking, Lori, is just, you know, can you provide us with some more detail to see what that's looking like?
Right, I know there's times, for instance, where a principal has to approve overtime or something like that, you know, at a site, and the money probably comes out of the site budget, I'm assuming, I don't know. Just so we get an idea of.
And I can tell you, they probably don't have a budget for it, but they have to approve it, and then they move dollars after the fact. Just,
Okay. Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
um,
that's understandable. But just-
I mean, it's roughly, for next year, it's projected to be $1.6+ million when you total up all the schools.
Oh.
So it's not a huge dollar amount, but we scrutinize even, you know, $1,000, $500. We've even talked about $5 in this committee. I know, so a little bit more detail along those lines.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's just,
Now, would you like to see it by individual school, breakdown by school, or in summary where consolidated they spend their funds?
I think it's more by school, right, Steve? You're wanting to understand by school?
Yeah, I think it's just to start out, you know, just so we have an idea. It's
And
a
maybe
page
just
in the
major
book.
categories?
Mhm.
Just the categories.
I don't, yeah.
Define category.
Well, what would you consider furniture?
Okay.
That's a
so
category.
by object, all right.
Yeah, object,
So-
okay, so I'm using a little different terminology from the
Labor,
business
purchase
world.
services, non-capital, capital.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think that would be a good, at least, starting point, and you know, maybe that just becomes an addendum to this. I think page 9 is probably all we need as far as the details in this particular book, but have it be in a separate addendum with more details.
No problem.
Okay. All right, other questions on June 2014
I do have one question.
vouchers?
Just related. The site funds or the allocation goes by enrollment, or is there another factor like
Typically
population?
enrollment.
Typical.
Although I know there might be some flat amounts that
Right,
It's
You know, like-
it's pretty
like-
much per member,
okay.
unless you're talking about maybe like their custodial supplies budget, and that might be by square foot of the building.
Oh, okay.
But their general allocation
No,
is
it's by
per head count.
Mr. Adler?
I did have one other question. I'm sorry I didn't get these to you ahead of time. This is more generalized than it is specific. This is another Office of the Principal one, and I believe I brought this up last year because I had the same concern that I have this year. And maybe there's legitimate reasons for doing this. I just see it as an accounting, for keeping control over accounting principles. It just seems a little loose for me. And that is reimbursed purchases for Pick and Save gift cards. I don't think it's a good practice to be using district checks to be purchasing gift cards, which are the same as cash, to reimburse to give to somebody. The purpose, I recall last year, there was something, and it was a good thing that we were doing with it. I'm just not real comfortable of purchasing gift cards with
Yeah,
it.
where those come into play often is where places won't take purchase orders. So, like your FACE classes, they need food for the course, and they
Yeah.
can't take a purchase order. So how else do they go and get the materials that they need for the class? Because it's perishable, it's not gonna keep. There's a quick turnaround time. So that's where we struggle, and if they don't wanna take it out of pocket, pay for it themselves and get reimbursed, we do not have a whole lot of other options.
Can Joe provide a check to somebody? Kind of hard when
Blank
you're
check?
not there.
No, we do not do blank
I don't mean
checks.
by blank check, but can we establish a credit account? Do they ever do that?
Where they exist, we've already gone that route, but some places just won't do it.
Okay.
Would not be in favor of that, because then there's no, necessarily, we lose control over how much or what could be purchased.
Well, the same thing is true of a gift card, though.
Well, true, but at least
at
you're
least
you're
we
seeing
control
what's
the
on there,
dollar
and you
amount.
can limit the top end to it.
And they have to
Okay.
turn around and return receipts.
Mhm.
It's sound
Well,
just like petty cash.
This says reimbursed purchase, Pick and Save gift cards. So somebody purchased them with cash, and then they're getting reimbursed?
Like,
What page?
Page 51. And that would be check number 284482.
This was when,
Which
it
check
was
number?
a purchase that was already made by a principal, and we're reimbursing that principal
Yeah.
for that purchase.
Purchase
he-
of gift cards.
Yes.
Yeah.
He purchased the gift cards with cash, and then we were repaying him for the purchase of the gift cards? Was that?
We're repaying that principal for the purchase.
Right.
so we don't know what he did with the gift cards.
For the,
But,
yeah. So-
I'm sure the only way to get that reimbursed is to have all the detail with it
Okay,
on the expense report, and that would be approved by that person's supervisor.
okay,
And then we'd also review it in accounts payable.
okay. We don't know what he does with the gift cards.
It would, I would have to look at that particular invoice, but I would assume it would be for, his home ec class or something of that nature, but I'd have to look at the particular invoice, and I can report that back to you.
Okay, it's more of a control issue that I'm concerned about than anything else. If I were an auditor, I'd look at this and I'd probably have a problem with the way that we're handling it, because there's no final receipt once the gift card is given to somebody else.
Well,
No,
there
but-
there
or
are receipts that
There
go
are,
back.
there is backup for all of that.
They have to turn the receipts in once they use the
They have
gift
to
card?
return all the
Okay.
receipts in,
Yes.
yes.
And it goes through two people. It goes through the supervisor.
It goes to the
immediate
supervisor, then
and-
it goes to the business office.
Got it,
Yeah.
okay.
So it gets checked, and there has to be a receipt, and I don't know how the system works.
Yeah, we check before we reimburse anybody, we make sure that it all has the proper backup and the proper signatures.
Okay, all right, that makes me more comfortable with the process then. Okay, and
You have one more, Steve?
I think so. Hang
Okay.
on 1 second. Yeah, this one was check number 284343 on page 35. And under the description, the invoice description, it says books to Catholic Memorial High School.
That's probably for, I believe that we have to purchase under the Common School Fund. One of those funds, either that or it could be maybe Title II, one of those funds where we get state or federal funding, we have to
Yeah, it's their-
purchase,
It's their federal grant,
yeah.
their allocation,
And
so.
it's based on all kids in the community, whether it's public or private, so we have to,
So we get the funds from the state, or it's federal funds.
This federal.
Mhm.
And then Catholic Memorial purchases the books through us? Or
In this
or
case,
they get
they-
their allocation of the pie, is what you're saying?
Be-
And then
Yeah.
they tell us what they want, we
Right.
buy the
Their
books
students
for
are,
them.
get a portion of those title funds. And in this case, they've asked for a reimbursement. So they're spending their portion of the
Got it.
funds.
Okay. That's it.
I didn't realize we did that.
I didn't either.
We do with all the private schools in the,
yeah,
Yeah,
anyone
I
that
mean-
would qualify,
yeah,
yeah.
anyone who qualifies, right, we do it with
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
basically.
They can choose not to participate.
Yeah, but we get credited for all the students who
All
live in the
students
district,
In the, yeah, right,
whether they're public or private.
yeah.
Gotcha.
In here busing too.
Yeah, well, the busing.
I knew,
about.
busing we knew about, but, yeah.
They're all the same, no matter where they go.
All right, other questions on the vouchers?
One more.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
There were a ton of purchases under Apple equipment,
Yeah.
and was that
Wave
thing like art education, audio visual, school library, was all that part of the iPad program? Waukesha One?
Wouldn't be part of the leases.
Is this,
There's a purchase. What page?
it's page 26 is the total, and the check number is 284263 for 39,000. I've never seen this come up before in the past.
Yeah, it's under general supplies.
Which page? I'm sorry, Steve.
26.
And what was the check number?
Check number is 284263.
Looks like some of it went to the flight academy.
Okay, so now tell me again your question.
Well, I've never seen a large purchase like this, other than through the Waukesha One program, to Apple. And I didn't know if we just started buying general computer supplies or whatever, printer, toner, whatever it is. Because it really doesn't specify, all it says is Apple equipment under the majority of this. I don't know what Apple equipment means. Are we,
Well, it starts on the previous page.
right?
So there's some
Software.
software application in there. If you look in the account number, if the last three digits are 965,
Okay,
that's Waukesha One.
all right.
So, software applications, that would be additional
Apps.
apps, exactly. If there is no project number there, it means the buildings are purchasing individual items. So, something that came outside of the Waukesha One initiative. They may be buying covers, additional apps, more plugins, TVs, anything to support
Yeah.
their initial application.
Yeah, if you were to like look at mathematics or social sciences, that's probably the category in which the app was bought. You know, it was an app for that particular,
Correct.
Subject
So,
matter,
you're right.
yeah.
So there's art, library media.
right?
undifferentiated, music, math, social studies, face, there's
Well,
even an athletic one there.
The reason I brought this up is that, I don't know if this is one of those unintended consequences, but having gone with the iPads, it seems like now the trend is gonna be, we're gonna purchase all these Apple products to complement our iPads.
That's the environment.
That's right.
Right.
And I don't think that that was something, these expenditures were a consideration when we approved $3 million a year on the iPads.
Well, I was under the impression it was, and actually we're below $3 million a year, so. So read my report.
Okay?
Um,
But now we're tied in to buying,
You're tied into Apple, yes, and I think I made that perfectly clear at the full board meetings when I explained it to everybody, that we were investing in the Apple environment. Apple is the only one that has that environment.
right, I understood that.
Okay.
But I didn't understand, and I don't think it was made very clear that we are going to be expanding in other areas of purchases to complement this environment. I understood the environment to be associated with the Macintosh that the teacher has.
Yep.
And the iPad that the student has.
Yep.
And now we're in that learning environment.
Yes.
Now what I'm seeing
Ecosystem,
is
yep.
a lot of additional purchases from Apple to expand on that environment. That's not, this isn't stuff that was really, if it's coming out of site budgets, this goes back to my concerns about site budgeting. Did we
Well, there's
did we have this plan?
if you look at it, 965 is very few of these, like, what's 341? What's
That's flow-through grant?
Both are grant, see. So the first
So-
one on 611 was a 965 for 18,341.
Right.
Computer software, that'd be apps and whatever.
That's
they
apps,
still
yeah.
run it, yeah.
Mhm.
There's some other things in here, though. Audio visual is probably Apple TV. What that allows us to do is to get it off the smart boards and actually project it on the TVs in the classroom. That's
It's more
basically a
cost
money
effective.
saver.
Mhm.
So there's some things in here that are actually creating efficiencies for us monetarily that, because they're in here, it seems like we are spending it, but you either spend $100 on Apple TV or $400 on a smartboard repair. Either way you're spending the money, we're spending $100 less on the Apple TV. So, and I totally understand what you're talking about, Steve. However, there are things, and the Apple TV is a perfect example, that are creating efficiencies for us that the schools need to buy. That purchase is creating the efficiency. We don't need a smart board. We don't need to fix the smart board. They don't need to buy software updates for the smart board. We'll use the Apple TV.
So-
Same thing with printers.
Okay.
The Apple TV will work with a printer, so we don't need a wireless printer.
Okay,
So there are some things that, but I totally understand what it seems like we're spending, just huge amounts of money to implement the Apple environment, but a lot of this stuff is actually less than maintaining the old environment,
Okay.
or what we had for an environment, the hodgepodge.
I understand that.
Okay.
And smart boards, they were wonderful when they first came out, and, and technology just keeps improving.
Yes.
And in some cases gets cheaper. I guess now my concern becomes, my smart board works fine, but the person in the next room down has an Apple TV, and I like that a whole lot better. When am I gonna get mine?
No, that's not the
Even
way
though
it
my
works. We
smart board
actually had
works
that
fine.
discussion about
Yeah.
smart boards. Smart boards are now throwaway. It's like a TV.
Yeah,
We are not retiring smart boards because we want to. When the smart board needs repair beyond what it's worth, which is little repair now. You can get a smart board, I think Steve said, for a couple, $300. Junk. They're like a TV, you throw them away now. When the repair or the maintenance becomes more than it's worth, then we will switch to the Apple TV because it's more cost effective. But no, that's not happening, and we actually had that discussion
Yeah.
at the technology committee.
okay.
And Lori, isn't it fair to say that we have budgets set up for those repairs? Those are separate budgets, separate from the Waukesha One program that we have going on, still within the technology budget, but we have monies budgeted for repairs and these kinds of things that Pat and Steve have been talking on, correct?
Correct. We have a district-wide technology plan that would cover those types of repairs
Right.
and maintenance. what you're seeing is a lot of the individual
Yep.
buildings
Yeah.
finding
Yeah,
individual needs.
right, it seems like a lot of this is for, and I'm just using Apple TV as a thing, the smart board's out is part of the budget to fix it, or it's part of the school budget to buy an Apple TV.
And-
So the school decides to buy the Apple TV, even though it's not part of the Waukesha one.
Okay, thank you.
And it makes sense that we probably would
Oh, yeah.
see a bunch of that
Yeah.
in June, because the summertime is a time when our tech team is out,
Upgrading.
upgrading, making repairs, doing as much of the technology work before the kids come back to school and at the end of August, beginning part of September.
Yes, and they're doing a lot of that right now. They're making decisions right now, are they gonna fix those smart boards, or are they gonna buy the $100 Apple TV unit?
Mhm.
So that's why, at the end of that school year, you're gonna see a lot. There may be a lot in the next one too, in the next vouchers.
Oh, yeah, summer's busy.
Yep.
All right, any other questions on the vouchers? Otherwise, I'd be looking for a motion at this time. Mr. Edlin?
I make the motion to approve the vouchers as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McCaffrey. Further discussion? Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 4-0, Lori. Good discussion. If you can get the questions in ahead of time, it allows Joe to do a little bit of research, but
When you're on vacation and you're using
We-
your vacation time to do it?
we have a light meeting tonight, so it worked out pretty well, so. Okay, we'll be moving on to our information items tonight. We do have two of them. First one is the monthly budget report. Joe, will you bring us up to speed on where we stand?
Certainly. With the July F&F meeting, right now, in the June 2014 monthly budget report, we're in the process of updating and booking our year-end accruals. So at this time, which is customary, we'll review the year-end statement, in the near future.
So in other words, you're going to keep us in suspense, just like every other year.
Yes.
Darn.
And then secondly, the second page is the tax collection update. And as of now, through June 2014, we've collected 85% of the levy. There are payments that come due, of course, in August. And 83% was the amount collected at this time last year. So that would conclude the budget report at this time.
Okay. Any questions? Comments? All right, well, we'll look forward to the year-end adjustments that you have to make. And do you think you'll have preliminary numbers for us by when?
September sounds good.
Okay. I know it's a couple months out.
Well, here's the thing, we have a union that's not settled, and so keep in mind, we haven't got 13-14 wages then finalized, and according to DPI, if we settle prior to October 1st,
Yeah.
we have to go back and put that into the appropriate year.
Yeah.
So the numbers could change right up to October 1st.
So we're in flux. We're in flux right now, which is pretty common at this time of the year. So, and you'll get into more detail on some of these assumptions next. So why don't we roll right into the discussion on the
Budget
2014-2015 budget.
We will do that. We can jump right in and start with the assumptions. They begin on page 2. The current budget is built on a revenue cap that has a $75 per member increase over the prior year. And so right off the bat, I have to point out an error in the book, and it's the second sentence on that first page there. It says this year per pupil increase is $150, it's $75. The $150 increase actually comes in the per pupil adjustment aid, which is confusing. It's an aid that is outside of the revenue cap. Last year, we received $75 per pupil, and that goes to $150 for 14-15. So that That's an extra almost $1 million, which makes this budget doable, because it's certainly not coming from within the revenue cap. The revenue cap itself is only going up a 0.46% increase. And the per pupil adjustment aid is something that new. The first time we saw it was in 2012-13. At that point, it was part of the revenue cap worksheet. This last state biennial budget put it outside of the cap, and so last year that was about $985,000, and it's $1.9 million this year. So we would be struggling without it. The budget includes a 2% reduction in health insurance premiums. That's a savings of about $340,000. The budget includes an expansion of the 4K program. We will be adding 3 district sites and 1 community partner for 14-15. The goal is to reach out and grab more of those 4-year-olds and get them into the program.
I have a question.
Mr. McCaffrey.
So we're gonna do 3 in-district sites, right? 3 additional.
Correct.
Are we closing down 3 community partners?
No, we are not.
Okay, so we're still gonna have the same amount of community partners we have this year, plus 1.
Plus 1.
And 3
Yeah.
additional
Yes.
district sites, okay.
Yes, so we're expanding
We-
Yep.
to,
That's
We
a big
just found
expansion.
that we had more, better attendance when they were at school sites. They
Right.
felt more like school community that
Yep.
way, so.
Yep, okay, great.
Mr. Adlin?
Last discussion that I remember, maybe it wasn't even discussion, it was just in passing, was that the Early Learning Center wasn't working out at White Rock. Where are we at with that?
it still will operate as a 4K site, but we also are moving the Harvey Phillip program from the Harvey Phillip building to the Welk Center.
So then we'll have 3 programs operating at White Rock? 3 different programs?
Yeah.
That will allow us to
4K
expand
sale and
STEM middle school.
HP.
Yeah, okay.
And then that'll secure that, make sure that building is STEM middle school for,
Are we
Many
okay
years
with
to
the
come.
mixed use, though? I mean, on one end, we've got, toddlers.
well, the number of,
Well, we
the
can
number of
separate by
4K
floors.
will be definitely much, much less than it has in the past, because we want to move those kids out to school sites, so,
So so what you're saying is ultimately, we're gonna move the 4K out of White Rock?
I don't know if completely, but we'll try to move as many of those kids out to school sites as possible, because we, again, talking with parents and so on, they like the school concept better. They
Yeah.
like being at the schools.
I'm not crazy about the mixed use portion of this, but, kids that are, in distress in the area of our school district are now gonna be in the area of very, very young children who are just entering the school system. And, if I were a parent, I'd be a little bit concerned about that. Just
Well,
the age difference alone, and
yeah.
then,
Right, but the students in alternative education are not necessarily stressed or distressed, they just need a different way to learn
right.
in order to keep them in school. But that would actually, with the SAIL program there, which is, post-high school students, it's actually a better mix, because then you'll have kids, actually more of kids of the same age
Yeah.
in that particular building. It is 2 distinct floors, I mean, very, very easy to separate the students, especially with the different entrances. But I think over time, you'll see the 4K moving back into the school sites, because that's what we're being told is
Works
a preference, so.
Yeah, and I
And
can see.
we watched, enrollments drop off when we went to the center, so.
Yeah. I would think Harvey Phillips would be excited to move to White Rock. It's a
Oh,
much.
beautiful. Yeah,
more- It's a
yeah.
much more modern facility than what
Yep.
they had, and we've been trying to figure out what to do with Harvey
On the
Phillips
bus
forever
line.
and ever. Yeah,
Better parking, just a whole number of different opportunities. And then again, that solidifies Saratoga for a long, long run as our STEM middle school.
right. Very good.
Because, as students, by the way, we have a waiting list for now for Hawthorne too.
Was that
So,
right?
yeah, so
Wow.
we've got to have room to make opportunity for those students who want to go on to a STEM middle school. So this is our only way we can do it,
That's wonderful.
yeah.
Good news. Okay.
So that will be one of the projects that we'll be looking at when the Siemens study comes back. We're hoping to have that done by, they are hoping to have the study done by August 1st, and then we can sit down, go through the priorities, and see what the results are.
Mhm. Do we need a special F&F meeting for that?
It's
A
possible.
workshop, if you will?
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on
Gonna
how
be a-
you want to.
That'd be a lot of
how we wanna
information
structure.
to digest at one board committee meeting. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Lori?
All right. We are still in a declining enrollment mode. Keep in mind, when we talk about revenue limit FTE, we're only counting residents. They may not actually be enrolled here, so it's different than head count. So, but in total residents, we are seeing a declining enrollment number there, and that puts us in what we call the declining enrollment exemption, which allows, rather than the revenue cap dropping drastically because you have higher numbers dropping off and lower numbers coming on in the three-year rolling average, it allows it more of a stair step. This year, we're looking at about a $400,000 cushion because of that declining enrollment. We aren't anticipating a lot of change in our state funding. We will experience about a $500,000 drop in equalization aid, but we can get into that when we get a little farther into the revenue.
That most likely will tighten up as you get closer to October, at least that's my experience. There's only one year where we got a nasty surprise, that was, I think, 4 years ago, but typically,
That was a big surprise.
this is based off our estimate, so if we, depending on where our audited numbers come in, that 500 could be a difference could be a much lower number.
His state aid is based on actual expenditures from the previous year, and so right now, they're only dealing with district's budget estimates.
But it's our best guess right now.
Correct.
Okay.
In the area of property valuation, the estimation includes a 1% decline in value. We know that's tapering off. We just don't know if we've hit the bottom yet. So I think the 1% is a conservative estimate.
And we won't know that number till October,
October,
so
correct.
I think
So,
that's a good
yes.
number to go with at this time.
We're anticipating about a $100 increase in the open enrollment rate. We have both expenditures and revenues based on open enrollment, students coming in and students going out. So the 13-14 cost was $6,485, and we're anticipating there would be about a $100 increase to that in the next year. And our fees have already been approved for next year, so there's no changes there. And of course, the tax levy includes only the general fund and CIP funds. There is no levy for community service.
Okay. Mr. Adler?
Question on student fees. I've heard this numerous times. A lot of people are understanding but not necessarily comfortable with or happy with the decision that we made as the recommendation of the athletic directors to come up with a per-year cap for the cost to participate in all sports. So we have a flat fee now. And a lot of parents saw that as a big jump in the cost to participate in athletics. But I explained to them that it covers everything. I don't know, I mean, it seems like the way that we come up with these numbers is we compare ourselves to other districts. This one was a recommendation by the athletic directors. My question is two-part. Number one, should we consider a single sport fee versus an all-year fee in addition to the all-year fee. So if you have somebody who only participates in one sport, they're not going to participate in 3 sports, so they feel they're overpaying, versus somebody who is really a, athletic person, likes to participate in all kinds of sports. I don't know what the fiscal impact would be, but I don't, I'm just trying to respond to some constituents who have that concern.
We can look at the history because it was a per sport
Yeah.
fee before.
Well, I don't mean necessarily a per sport. I'm saying, the way, if I'm kind of getting this right from what people tell me, is that if you participate in 2 sports, it would have been the same as if it was before.
$75 per sport, now it's $150.
Right, but if somebody only wants to participate in 1 sport, because you can participate in, 3 a year?
Well, 1 per season, so you could
Yeah.
actually get 4 if you do summer baseball.
Right, but you got somebody who is only a runner and participates in track. So rather than spending $150, which before they were only spending $75, offer maybe the person who participates in 1 sport, specializes in that sport, the opportunity to just participate in that 1 sport at a lower cost.
Yeah, we did discuss that as a negative when we adopted the fees, and I don't think we had an exact count when we were asking our athletic directors, but they felt that was a pretty small portion. That question was actually asked Steve.
Yeah,
I don't recall what that percentage was roughly that they tossed out, but it was relatively small. You know, but what you're asking is should we, and we could look at this more in April of next year. I think what we ought to do is
Have
put
some
it down a
history.
note, and then between now and April, why don't we get back to our athletic directors to see really, you know, how many students does this impact, and whether or not, you know, they would put forth a recommendation to have just a single sport fee.
yeah, it was part of the discussion to do it, but we didn't have any feedback. Now I'm getting the feedback
Sure.
as part of
And-
the implementation.
The
That's
hope
fair.
was at the time that we would see participation increase in some of the, maybe not the most popular sports, because there wouldn't be an additional cost to them, so it wouldn't hurt them to try golf or tennis or, something new.
Right.
And maybe we could get some feedback on how well that's working
Sure.
in March or April of next year.
Sure. And the second part to that is, I really don't have any clue, when we collect that fee, how much it actually covers the cost of sports in general, of the athletic budgets. There's an awful lot of expenses that we see every month, transportation costs, purchasing of apparel, coaching fees, umpiring fees, all these fees, and, what part are we covering with the fees? This would be something that I can share with parents and say, you're paying $150, but realistically, it's costing us, as an average for all the sports, it's costing us,
We had that report, though, how much it costs per participant. I mean, some of those sports was $300 per participant. I mean, golf is astronomical.
Yeah, I think golf was the most expensive.
It's 300 something, wasn't it? per
I don't
participant?
recall. I thought it was more than 300 actually, but
well,
But yeah, I mean, the $75 covers very
I'll tell you what's most expensive is swimming.
No, golf is the most expensive. Golf is the most expensive.
We don't calculate the cost of operating the pools and
Well,
swimming.
We-
yeah, we don't.
And
but we don't.
and the fact
yeah.
that we're co-oping with other schools just to be able to have a team
No, I
tells
understand
me
that.
that our costs are through the
I can
roof.
tell you that the $75 covers very little in the budget
Yeah,
for athletics. Athletics is expensive, just
Yep.
the insurance kills you.
yeah. And I understand the athletics part, and I'm gonna go back to what I've always said is, when parents bring this up with me, I say, look, the state constitution requires us to educate your kid, not provide extracurricular activities, and that's what sports are. That's just a fact of what we're required to do by law. So we're taking money away from education to provide these other activities. Not that that's a bad thing, it's every school district does it, but this is a point. Thank you.
well, there was a pretty comprehensive report that our ADs had done when we talked on this last time, broken out by sport. And if we could maybe resurrect that come March or April, why don't we make this a more robust discussion? And we can't, at this point in time, we can't change the fees.
Right. It's
Just
April.
per our policy.
Mhm.
the policy or the rules that we've implemented on ourselves, but we can look at it for next year, Steve, so.
Okay, thank you.
Lori?
Okay. Okay, continuing on with the expenditures. You'll see included in this budget are some new positions. There's an assistant principal at Harvey Phillip, an assessment coordinator, guidance counselor, social worker, 13 teachers, 4.5 custodial positions, and 1 clerical position that are being added. Some of those have funding, so they're not totally going to the bottom line of the budget. The assistant principal position and 3 teacher positions are being funded from purchase services that we no longer will be using, outsourcing through special education
So we-
services.
You feel it's better to bring it in-house as opposed to outsource it?
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there are 3 special education teacher positions that we're taking a reduction in assistants, educational assistants, in order to get teachers back in the classroom. One of the handouts that was provided is a breakdown of the teacher staffing. That will give you a breakdown of what's in the 14-15 budget. We did do some reclassification of positions so that it would be more reflective of instructional versus support. So you're going to see a large variation in a reduction in instructional cost, increase in support cost under the instructional services category, the 2-2 function. And that's a reclassification of coordinator and effectiveness coaches. So in the past, let's say a coordinator of mathematics was coded to math instruction, but they do not have direct contact with students. So in order to be consistent, we said, okay, let's clean it up.
This is more accurate.
And so this
This is more
is more accurate.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, when you're trying to compare one set of numbers to the other,
Sure.
it's you're going to go, what did we just do in some of the categories? Okay.
But moving forward to the year after next year, we'll be able to compare apples to apples.
Exactly.
Again, and again, it's going to be a more accurate classification of those people.
Exactly. And so from this sheet, you can see what's been defined as instruction versus, and under the classroom area, then it would be anything in instruction. In the book itself, anything under the instruction tab is the functions start with a 1. So when we get into, so the first section of it is instructional, the second, anything starting with a 2 is a support service.
Okay.
Okay. We've already talked about the change in the health insurance premiums. We are looking at, gosh, was it 6% increase in dental? Yeah, 6% increase in dental that goes into effect October 1st. So you'll see a blended rate in here. That plan year, because of our transition of when we changed providers, it got later, so it's got a later start as far as when the premiums go into effect for a 12-month cycle. Utility costs. Rather than build the gas budget off of where we were this last year, we used a typical winter usage. So it will look like we've got a reduction in gas, and that's because during the 13-14 school year, we had to move more money into the utilities because of the cold winter. So as you look at the comparisons, just keep in mind, we're budgeting for a typical year, not the year we've just
So you have an
directed
in
from.
with Mother Nature saying this is going to be typical? Right. I'm glad I know you, Lori.
It's that crystal ball thing, yeah. Hey, we've got the mild summer, we're starting at least
No,
in
but
the right
that
connection.
makes sense. We shouldn't base it
Yeah.
upon a really
Yeah.
cold winter, so. I think that makes
And
sense.
so, and that's exactly what we did in 13-14. We started out with what a typical budget would be, and then during the year, when we realized
Had to
that
adjust.
the gas usage was going right up there, we had to find dollars other places and transfer them in. So that
Sure.
would be the normal process.
Okay,
Insurance costs, we are anticipating an increase in workers' compensation. It's not huge, but our mod rating did go up a tick, so we are going to see a few more dollars in that direction. Our transportation budget does include a 2.5% increase in rates. Now that we've had such a marvelous year off of our previous year, we've seen the dip. Now we're going to start seeing the inflationary factor kick in. But the savings are obviously still there from our transition. There is no long-term borrowing. We do anticipate having a short-term borrowing again, but at a reduced rate again. So we've been very effective under the process of borrowing only for the periods of time when we experience shortages, and we would continue on that cycle unless for some reason we see something drastic changing in like interest earnings, where it would be advantageous to have the money longer. We already talked about tuitions, same thing on the expenditure side. The technology budget does include the Waukesha 1 plan. As we get a little farther into the book, we have one page that summarizes Waukesha 1, so I'll point that out as we get there. Just so we can keep track of where all those dollars are going, because they are significant.
Yep.
We are anticipating a reduction in handicap aid again. The special education funding from the state level, it continues to shrink a little bit every year. And we do not see that trend, unfortunately, changing. There is a change in reporting of Medicaid aid or Medicaid reimbursement. The state can't quite decide where they want us to put that. So, as you recall, at one time it started out, it was solely in the general fund. And then they required us to move it back into the special education fund. Now we split it to make it interesting. There's a portion, the administrative reimbursement portion that goes in the general fund, and the direct cost correlation for specific services goes into the special education fund. So,
and I know we've stayed on top of collecting what's owed to us much better in the last handful of years than before, 3 or 4 years. So most importantly to the district is that we get the monies coming that we deserve. Do we remain on top of that, Lori?
actually, that's an excellent question, and I'm going to flip you to page 34. It's under the revenue section. The very last line of that detail of federal sources, Medicaid reimbursement, you'll notice the 13-14 budget has a combined total of $1.8 million. Next year, we are looking at a total of $950,000. The reason for that drastic drop is because in 13-14, they finally have gotten caught up. The state went through they contract the auditing of those services out. They went through several years with a vendor who, as it turned out, did not do a very good job. Then they had to bring in somebody else, and all of those years were audited, and we have been getting reimbursements based on those old years. And so they actually have finally gotten almost current.
Caught up.
Yeah, so you're seeing multiple years of catch-up back pay in 13-14, and we do not anticipate that we have no more back pay to go get.
Okay,
So we're going to go back to a typical reimbursement now.
all right.
So that's the reason for that drastic change in those numbers. We are continuing to use indirect cost allocations. They are not significant, but what that means is there's a portion of the federal funding that we can siphon off to be used for administrative costs for reimbursement, just for the processing, the administering of grants. And we had not, 13-14 is the first year that we applied that. And what that does is helps us recoup some of those local costs that we would expend that you can't directly put into the grant. And then finally, we have the artificial turf project set up in Fund 47 is where it's found its home. And you will see we've got budgets in here for that. From there, if you'd like to go to the summary section, we can actually look at some numbers. So page 10 is a summary of all of the funds. So combined, you will see we're looking at total revenues of $159,416,667, with total expenditures of $161,696,449. In the reporting of the pages, we combined the general fund and the special education fund because they both are our costs of instruction as we go through the main sections. And then the other funds will be found under the other funds tab a little farther back in the book.
While we're on this page, just from a summary perspective, community service funds, from a revenue perspective, are those just gone? Is that done?
We are not able to issue additional levies any longer.
Okay,
And so, if you like, we can start with the other funds section, and we can talk through how that's been restructured.
that's okay. You can go in your order. I just was curious. I saw nothing in the revenue side of things
Right?
there, and I just
Very
couldn't
observant.
remember what the statutes were right now for that, so.
Well, and there had been revenue there in prior years, so.
This is the very first year where I know in the past we've chosen, since our community service fund was built up over time, we chose not to add to it, and we just started spending it down. But the legislation had changed to essentially eliminate that revenue source. And this is the first year that it's been eliminated as a revenue source, other than us voluntarily not collecting more.
Right, it's
levies.
the first year where we don't have a choice in the
Okay.
matter.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
You can just start with the general and the special education funds together.
Okay, well, and actually, if we want to jump right to, what I'll do is I'll just walk you through and just let you know what's here. So the next page there is a breakdown of revenues between the two funds by the various categories. We then have a breakdown of the expenditures by major category, meaning salary, fringes, purchase services, non-capital and capital, those types of breakdowns. That would be on page 13. You'll notice obviously our largest costs go to salaries and fringe benefits, and that makes up 77% of our total expenditures between the general and special education funds. Take those same expenditures on page 15, it breaks that information down by function. So you get a general idea of, are we spending it on physical education, co-curriculars, general administration, insurance, those types of categories you find broken down on page 15. And then to take it a step deeper, if you will, page 17 and 18 takes those same expenditures and breaks them down even farther by function. So you can get into art education, English language, foreign language, math, right on down the list.
And these are the formats that the DPI requires us to present, correct?
The DPI format is page 15.
Okay.
So it goes to the second digit. And page 17, 18 takes it down a layer farther, and that's an optional.
Okay, we're
But-
not required, but we do.
We do.
Sure.
For reporting purposes, page 15 is what we report.
Okay.
As you adopt the budget, it's in that format. But we track it obviously deeper than that.
Mr. Edlin?
Or in page 17, up towards the top under regular curriculum, secondary curriculum, the increase budgeted amount between 13 and 14 and 14, 15 increased 219%.
Yeah, what you're seeing there is an account that hasn't been broken down yet. So in a case, I don't specifically have the detail, but I'm going to guess it's a grant that we do not have next year's allocations for grants. So what we did is just put placeholder in, and because we do not have the exact breakdown, it's in a holding slot until we can break it down.
Okay.
So, and that's where that secondary means is just not broken down yet.
Okay, so the real amount is going to be closer to the 502,000 in the 13, 14 budget.
Yeah, I don't recall anything
the
in there
grants.
that it would cause that distortion, other than that type of reporting. It's just where we don't have the detail.
Thank you. And one-
Yeah, Mr. Edlin?
One more question is the gifted and talented program. It looks like we're going to reduce the amount in that budget by 36%. Is that due to a drop in participation in that program?
It is not. It's the coordinator stipend for G&T. It had been reported as instruction, and now it's a support service. So the stipend piece came out. for
Okay.
the-
So we're not reducing the program at all? It's just a matter of where
Accounting-
funds are
accounting
allocated?
change.
Yeah.
Pardon? Just be an accounting change, well, how it's accounted
Right.
for.
Okay, thank you.
And that's probably a misnomer to say we only spend 35,000 on gifted and talented, because, teachers are coordinating that into their classrooms every day, but they're just using their site budgets to do so. So that's an area where we really do not have a good method to track what we truly are spending on those types of programs, just because they cross so many areas.
So a typical request would come from a teacher who has gifted and talented child in their class. I need additional educational materials to help that child in their abilities. And so they'd make a request to the principal at that site for an expenditure. I'm just trying to hypothetically coming up with a scenario for,
You see, it's in the area of math, and they're looking for expanded math curriculum. They might go out and buy some additional apps. Well,
okay, sure.
it's either going to show up in the iPad Waukesha 1 costs. It could be showing up as math curriculum. It doesn't, it loses its identity as gifted and talented.
Okay, thank you.
And there's actually a formal process, Steve, too, to identify those gifted and talented students.
Right.
And it
Yep.
roughly estimates, it's different year to year, but it's roughly 5% of our students that are in that program. So it does impact a quite large number of students in our district.
Keep saying Les Paul would have been identified.
Lori?
Okay. And so then, just continuing through there, you'll see some history laid out on page 19 and 20. Just compares revenue and expenditures over a 5-year period. Page 19 is the general fund, page 20 is the special education fund, just to give you some background to look at. Page 21 takes the special education fund and breaks it down by funding source. So you can see where we get grant funding versus our local district's funding that is funded by property taxes and aid. And then that takes you to page 22, which is our tax levy. So keep in mind, it's still early in the game to be estimating tax levy. There's a lot of pieces that are still out there, so it's not in stone. I can guarantee this is the number it is not going to be, but
You can guarantee change.
it's our best guess at the moment. So we would be looking at, as we mentioned earlier, a 0.46% increase in the total revenue cap. We're looking at a reduction in equalization aid. That leaves us a total tax levy of $78,358,762. That's a 1.27% increase from where we certified the 1314 levy. If property values drop by 1%, that would give us a mill rate of $9.32. But again,
We don't know those numbers yet.
though they're,
And we won't
you
know that number, which is a
rough,
very
so,
important number
State.
in October.
Yes.
Okay. It always fascinates me that we actually are a quarter done with our year, and then we certify, or then we finalize our budget and certify our levy, but that's just the way we have to operate. And I don't think we have much of a say in actually having them change us to a fiscal, well, we work on a fiscal year.
We do.
It'd be
and-
sure nice to just have the laws be determined on a fiscal year for us, but they're determined on a calendar year basis, so
That's correct.
that's just the way it goes.
Actually, the
Schools-
state's on a fiscal, I think we're one of the few that, I should say, the city might be the only one that's on a calendar year. I think most other jurisdictions are on a fiscal year.
Yeah, and tax levies operate on a
So
calendar
then
year.
why don't we correlate the legislation better so we can have information sooner than later?
I think it's all around the taxes.
Can you work on that for us,
Sure,
Mr. Gray?
Sure. That recommendation's been out there, it was probably 8, 9 years ago, to get everyone on the same calendar, but it just didn't work out, so.
Okay.
Page 23 gives you just a summary, again, history of where our state aid has come in, where our tax levy has been, and some history on our mill rate. So, just informational at this point. You can see where we've kind of been up and down, but we certainly are well within the range of where we have been.
Sure.
Let's see, so we already talked about the Medicaid piece. If I can then jump you to page 35. It's the last section under revenue. Just want to point out some pieces that have been added to the books for informational pieces for you. There's a running total of our existing leases that the district has participated in on page 35. The first one was in 2012 with West High School, starting with a small Apple lease. Then through the one that was approved last month for issuance this month with Apple, I think it's wave 3 and 4 for our devices. So the equipment that we currently have acquired through lease totals $10,694,000. That list there. And we anticipate one more issuance, the final wave in January. Because those numbers are not known, we have not included a lease in the budget book. There is funding for the payment but not the full cost of the lease. Keep in mind, under governmental accounting, we recognize, when we enter into a lease, we recognize that as a revenue source. And then we record the full value of the equipment in the year that we enter in the lease. So those two wash each other out. They don't impact the bottom line. So we will amend the budget at the time when we issue that lease, when we know the real numbers.
Lori, for those that make sense, I'll qualify this. Could you put a close date on there too? So, you know, like the West High School Apple lease, that's a very specific, we know what the close date is on that. But,
Can I refer you to page 65?
oh. Sure. It's already there?
I think that will answer your question.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
So it gives us the breakdown with more, it just gives us a lot more
Right.
detail.
So my apology
starting and
for
ending.
the
Gotcha.
fine print. But what
This
I try to do is
this
give you
is
the
what I was
history
looking
of
for.
the leases. So you can see, they are all 3-year leases, so we are cycling out of them.
Mhm.
And then the intention would be then as the devices get retired, and then we have to enter a lease, replacement lease. We've got old leases coming off, and that will leave room for new leases coming on to continue the cycle if need be.
And although we're looking at 3 years to essentially pay for the devices, if I recall, Mr. McCaffrey, from a use perspective, we're looking at 4, maybe 5 years of use
Right.
that we would like to get out of the devices. So there's essentially at least 1 year where we're not really paying anything
Yeah,
for.
At least 1 year.
And maybe even 2, and
Yep.
we'll kind of see how that plays out. We don't have a sense of that yet, but we will begin to get a sense of that soon, so.
Well, we should know, because I think we just rolled off the West lease, right?
That one has been finalized as the first one for the Waukesha One Wave.
So we'll start to get a little, an idea how long those devices are gonna last after the lease is up. It's gonna be at least 1 year, I can guarantee.
And we have been coming in under budget, as you had
Yes.
mentioned, for the leases of the new machines.
Yes,
So,
we actually are gonna be transitioning off the Apple Airs back onto the 4s, which will be a significant cost savings for the Waukesha One.
okay.
And I should qualify, when we roll off, when we were talking about rolling off that lease, that's in the 14-15 budget.
Yep.
So
right.
the West has a July payment, so it is finalized this month.
After
right.
the start of the, right.
Thanks for
Okay.
pointing out the detail.
Issued, and I was taking you to that page anyway, so that's where I was gonna skip and jump into that one. And then the page next to that, page 66, is a breakout of just the Waukesha One program. So that you can see, we started first payment 2012-13. And again, this is where, keep in mind, leases show up both as equipment purchases on the expenditure side and a revenue source. So that's where you'll see that net cost there comes in, is a more accurate number.
Okay.
Because I don't want to have you panic when you see that we spent $5.6 million.
Right.
Okay. And since we're continuing going back through the book, page 73 is our debt service fund. The only debt application we still have is under the OPEB obligation. We have not set a levy for that for some years now. The balance there's $1 million due this next year, and it is not likely that we will have a settlement from our litigation by then. So the plan, as has been for the previous year, is that the general fund is loaning the debt service fund the money to make those payments in anticipation of a settlement in the future.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. There is no other debt. You'll see that the last long-term debt payment was paid off in 2012-13, and that's on page 74. You can see those nice blank lines.
Not too many districts our size that I would bet has that number of 0.
It's got to be a rarity to not have outstanding debt.
And that's a hats off to everybody in the district, not just administration, not just the board, but individual employees that work here can save us money too in various ways, and we all work hard to stay within our budget and to be under our budget. So our hats off to everyone who helps us out there. So it's a team effort.
Well, and that's not to say that we should stay debt-free, but that's a
But as a
discussion
business
for a
owner
future
pointed out
session.
to me, debt is not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It depends on how the debt is used.
Yep, that is correct.
And right now, I'd prefer to be in debt and borrow because the interest rates are historically low. And now is a time when you really want to borrow up to your eyeballs and use the money to pay for things that, you need to get done and you don't have the cash to do them. And
Which is exactly the conversation we need to have in August.
that's.
Yep. It's coming up.
Yep.
It's coming up.
That's coming up.
So I just want to point out that
Right.
there is no assumption of debt in here.
Let's
that.
just say we're in a good position so that we can decide if we want to leverage other monies or not.
That's correct.
From a debt perspective. And it's much better to be in that decision-making position of saying yes or no to it versus, well, we just have to pay it because we incurred the
Right.
debt already.
Yeah,
So
we would be
I
in
think we should feel good about being in the position that we're in because that allows us then to make choices.
Very sound financial
Yep,
choices.
exactly.
Yep,
Exactly.
thank you.
Lori?
Page 75, 76, and 77 are the capital projects funds. Page 76 is your traditional layout of revenue and expenditures. If you flip to the next page, you'll see it's broken down by the type of project that we have within our capital projects fund. So, for the first time, you'll see we have an artificial turf project fund. We continue to have our property sales, land ordinance fund, and then the capital expansion, our CIP fund is the first one listed there. You may recall when we approved the artificial turf project fund that part of the funding was coming from the property sales, so you can see that reflected on that page. And you're gonna notice that the, a negative fund balance there for the artificial turf. That's because the money comes in over a period of 10 years, but we are going to be purchasing the turf up front. So again, the fund balance will fall back on the property sales fund to subsidize that until all revenues are in.
Okay.
So I just wanted to point that out as a reminder that.
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
why it looks rather strange.
No, this is good. This is good detail.
I just had a question. I see Mr. Norder's here tonight, and I was wondering if we might give him the pleasure of speaking to us about his budget for just a moment?
Sure. Glenn, why don't you join us?
Can I put that on hold just a second?
Sure.
Be-
Oh. Come on up and have a chair, but we'll put you on hold.
There is an additional sheet that you have that's not, but it's just a loose sheet. What I've tried to do is break down the facilities and grounds budget, so you can see all the components of where it comes from. This is a combination of both the general fund and the CIP funds. So you can see
Okay, I see.
there isn't a lot of distinction between the CIP and the general fund on the types of projects that can go into them. The district chooses to use a CIP fund, and the reason we do that is it's beneficial on our equalization aid formula. And that's really the only reason we do it.
Talking Fund 41?
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct. So there are projects within the 10 fund that do the exact same thing as what we put in the CIP. So I tried to pull them all together so you can get an idea of the total dollars being spent.
So how do we differentiate what goes into which fund?
Well,
What-
we set a specific levy for the CIP, for the capital expansion fund, and we can't exceed that because that caps the dollars.
Right.
But in any given year, we could have more projects than that, so the general fund picks
Rolls into
those up.
10, Fund 10 then? Okay,
Correct.
Okay.
And so what I've tried to do is give you a breakdown of where those dollars go, regardless of what label we put on them, 10 or 41. So they're consolidated here.
Okay.
And you can see on the bottom, those totals tell you in any given year which fund we used, whether it was the general fund or the capital projects funds. And I specifically excluded utilities and the synthetic turf project, just because it's got its own funding source, and I didn't want to kind
Sure.
of confuse the issues.
That makes sense, yeah.
So I'm hoping that helps provide a little more information for you. Glenn hasn't seen it, so I didn't want you to start have you asking him questions on something that he doesn't have in front of him.
You're gonna shock him now.
Yeah. Miss-
What? They cut
Where
my
is all that
budget.
money going? So for 13, 14, you'll notice total facilities, just over $12 million. Now, that includes your labor, materials, and all of our projects. What happens in a typical year is we start out with a base budget, and as we taper down the end of the year, we find if we've got dollars left over, what we'll do is we'll transfer those to the service building for summer projects. So while you start out with, the $1,125,000 we've been given, in any given year, we are putting more dollars there. And I guess that's the message I want you to understand, is that we're not limited to the $1,125,000. So if we, let's see, about half, there's a line called total maintenance, operations, and remodeling that does not include labor. So in 11-12, there's 3.9 million, I went 4.2 million. For 13-14, it was $5 million, and next year, we've got a budget of $4 million.
So
Where you at?
what's that include right here?
On the bottom.
So what does that include then?
So it's
Total maintenance
non-labor.
operations.
It's
Okay,
It's not the custodial maintenance staff.
okay,
So it would be the purchase services, the materials, supplies, all capital projects, the big projects, whether we contract them out or do them in-house.
okay. This is really good. We've never had this level of detail to truly understand, what monies are going into this and how we're dividing it out between, the different funds. So this gives us a much more accurate picture of what are we really doing.
Well, and that's what I was hoping to do, because we separate it in different funds, it's hard to pull all those buckets together. So this truly isn't a DPI worksheet, but it does consolidate those pieces to give what I think
Helps
is
our
a better
discussion.
picture.
A discussion as to how we've wanted to have this discussion
Yeah,
throughout
we're-
the year. This may be very useful to come back to throughout the year and say, hey, where are we at? And here are the projects that we're working on, this is what we're anticipating, and so on and so forth. And this isn't by project, obviously, Glenn, you have a separate list, for that. But this gives us a comprehensive picture with the labor included.
Correct, so.
So Mr. Evelyn, did you have some specific questions on this for Glenn and/or Lori? It might be both of you.
I'll start out with Lori. Under maintenance, district maintenance, we're dropping Boy, a huge amount, 58.8% from 1.936 million down to 797,000.
Okay, that's where, keep in mind, I said,
No, not-
we move money over as we find that we've got money available in other budgets that aren't gonna be spent out during the year.
So we moved money into that budget last year?
Exactly.
Was there something that came up that required, I mean, huge amount, that doesn't include utility bills, I take it?
Correct. I've excluded utilities because that's not a controllable cost of the
Yeah.
service building.
Compared to the year before then, in the 13-14 budget, we shuffled $800,000 nearly into that budget.
Well, it depends year to year on what projects are necessary, but, this is where Glenn might be able to give us an idea of what things we added this year. I know, like, the west parking lot, we did ahead of schedule. What it allows us to do is shift those items in the 5-year plan that might be scheduled for years out, and it allows us to pull some of those forward.
Okay, so last year, we were in the black, so we were able to shuffle money over to Glenn to get some of these projects taken care of. This year, we're gonna budget something back to the normal range, what we had in the years past. And if we end up in the black again, we can shuffle more money over there. The only concern that I have about that is that the board gave the administration a recommendation, is that we wanna shuffle more money into maintenance. Not necessarily hope that we have money at the end of the year to try and, get things done that have been on a list for 10 years, but to really start tackling some of the things that'll, I'm sure will be part of our August discussion.
I think that's a good question, because we have set a minimum dollar amount in the past. So I guess the question here is are we really planning for that minimum amount or not?
So this points out that there's $4 million in here of,
Of needed repairs.
yeah, so the budget is a minimum of 4 million, and we anticipate that there would be, a transfer farther down the road, and that exceeds the threshold that was set.
And we've been so focused in on, if I could just try and see if I can translate from past years to now. We've been so focused in on that the one terminology of district maintenance, period, to essentially, we're thinking it's covering everything, and it really doesn't.
No, it's
It's
not.
just, yeah, but we've been so focused on just that one number, Steve. I think the beauty of what's in front of us is that it shows us that overall, we are really putting in way more than what we originally were focused on that one fund. And so this gives us more of a true look now at it. Now, the question today would be, okay, so we spent 5 million last year, why are we going down to 4 million this year? Maybe we should ask that question. That would update us on, or we can now use this updated pro forma.
Yes, and that 5 million includes the dollars that we shifted in at the end of the year from other locations that freed up money.
Okay.
And that was close to $1 million.
Okay. So if I was to maybe try to really boil it down, we're budgeting the same as last year before we had some excess that we identified and we decided we should use it on some projects to get caught up on some things.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So we're basically at the same level as last year starting out, at least for budgeting purposes.
Right, and that's why I wanted to have that conversation, so it didn't look like we're cutting back,
Okay.
because we aren't. We are keeping the level at a consistent budget to budget, but as we are able to, we also then are trying to work ahead and get some of those longer-term projects off the plate as well.
And I know we've been chipping away at that list, and, Field of Dreams thing's really that's gonna take a major thing off of your list. Can you give us, Glenn, some kind of idea of what the total cost of your list is? If we had you came in here tonight and said, give me a check and I can get all this stuff done in a year, what would that amount be? Just rough guess.
I think we put that together about a year ago, and I think it was about $24 to $25 million.
And did that include Harvey Phillips or not? I think it did.
Yeah, actually did.
It did. And I don't know, it was 1.2 million on
Yep.
Harvey Phillips or something like that. And so we've been whittling away at that list pretty quickly, I think, on some of the major things that you had on there. So that list would be, well, I guess we need an update before August to see where we're at on that. And I mean, that's gonna be part of the conversation, is should we be borrowing to get that list caught up while the interest rates or bonding rates are so favorable right now? And that's why, again, it goes to debt's neither a good thing or a bad thing, it's when you need the money and what for. So, okay, that was pretty much my question. That was one of my questions. That was number one. Number two, under facilities remodeling, can you give us an idea of some of the projects that you have listed for the 1.1 million for next year?
Sure, we're doing the upgrade of Flight Academy. We're adding on to the Flight Academy over at Horning.
Adding on, what is that?
We're expanding into a couple other classrooms that are being repurposed for flight. We're creating the Quest Academy at Butler. It somewhat mirrors the Flight Academy. We're doing that at Butler, which is also taking some classrooms, redesigning them, moving into some additional classrooms, so there's some destruction and rebuild. We are creating the maker space, or what they call the maker space at Randall, up in the media center area, expanding that for them to be able to more collaborate in that building. South, we are expanding the engineering academy into a couple more classrooms, and also the health academy at South we're expanding. Along with we did the parking lot but that's not in this one, so I won't count that. But some, trying to think of some of the other projects we got going on out there. We're
Yeah,
doing
I
some
didn't
roof
print
repair.
I know you sent me a list and I didn't bring it with me, so, but I thought in August, we decide how we want to structure that next meeting, whether if we want a worksheet to go through all of those projects and the recommendations of the findings.
Sure.
If, I can see that being a meeting just by itself with the detail.
And we've had a number of finance and facilities meetings that once we get up to 5, 6, 7, 8 items, we're starting to run into 3 or 4 hour meetings. And I think the use of the workshop is a good one, or whether it's a workshop or a special meeting of F&F. Maybe it's a workshop. Workshops include all board members. A special meeting of F&F would just be this committee, so we should think through
Yeah,
that, whether it's a
have that
workshop
conversation
versus a
and see.
special F&F meeting. But you saw us, we pulled the charter schools out into a workshop and actually a separate meeting to try and cut down on some of those really long meetings. So I think that's a good suggestion,
Okay.
Steve, and
Yeah, if we could, my suggestion would be that we have 2 separate meetings. One where Glenn can bring the pizza and the soda and entertain us all night.
I can do that.
All right, I'd appreciate that. And just so we have some idea of, what's going on in the district and what the recommendations are and how much is it gonna cost and, just so we have some scope. We don't have scope right now. I mean, we've got your list and I really appreciate that list. Quite frankly, I don't even know what's going on this summer in all the various buildings.
lot.
Yeah, but we don't know that, and maybe in the future in the budget books, if, like you said, Glenn provided you with a list, if we just had a 1-page summary of, this is what we want to do next year as part of this budget, this will be part of our capital
But the
improvement.
reason it's not in here is because I didn't want to make that assumption without knowing what the study revealed as far as what we should be doing.
Okay,
So that
but
was
you'll update it,
intentional.
you'll
That was
update this then
intentional in
into
my-
August.
Right.
Okay,
Correct,
fair enough.
yep,
yeah.
just so we have some idea, because we don't know what goes on, and you have one heck of a busy summer every year. And trying to play, all the different hats you have to put on, it's kind of hard to even stop and ask you a question, what's going on here and there. Okay, thank you. That's pretty much it.
And a couple of those projects you tossed out there are overdue. The expansion of our academies up at South, and the repurposing of space at both Horning and Butler. If you guys do the kind of job that you did at STEM, boy, our hats are going to be off to you guys once again. Your team did a phenomenal job at both of the STEM campuses. And when you look at how those spaces are used differently, in that case, is project-based learning, it really makes a difference. So people listening may not understand how important the environment is. It can be very important to have that right space to be conducive to learning. And we're just seeing that some of our older buildings aren't configured in the manner that they need to be configured to promote the learning to the greatest degree possible. And your team has done an excellent job, in the past, Glenn, repurposing spaces. So
Thank you.
good luck to the team, and thumbs up. Hopefully they'll do just that fantastic job like they've done in the past. So,
Thank you.
all right, Lori, do you have any other aspects of the
I
budget
have
that
one
you
more
want to
page
point
to
out?
refer you to, and that's that Community Service Fund. That's on page 83. And you can see how the budgets look a little different. What we have done is pulled some of the previous projects out of the Community Service Fund and moved them into the general fund. Page 83 has the traditional breakdown. If you flip to the page in the next page, it breaks it down by type of project. So you can see what has been there over a 4-year period and what has been phased out. So we are now down to the Community Services Liaison for the Hispanic community and the Suzuki Strings program. And then that facility usage is the cost of opening our buildings for, say, public elections.
Okay.
So those are the 3 projects that remain within that fund.
Okay.
Do we get reimbursed for that?
No,
No.
Cost, we do not.
we do not.
And that was one of the purposes of that fund, was to,
To cover the cost.
yeah, to levy for those types of things.
Right.
That weren't really focused on, I guess, our core instruction, benefits to the community. But yeah, we are gonna use up a good portion of what we have left, and
So for
that's
instance,
what, you know,
the public
times
service
are changing,
broadcasting
so.
of our meeting had been funded through the Community Service Fund in the past. We've now moved that back to the general fund. What it does is it slows down the spend out of that fund, which will allow those programs to carry on a little longer until we find an alternate funding source or phase them out.
Yeah, I mean, the audience isn't looking at the numbers, but for those, if those 2 programs roughly cost the same, we have roughly another 2 years. So actually 3 years total. If that's all that we funded with the remaining monies, we could carry those things on for 3 years essentially.
Correct.
What does that community service liaison actually do? That's a person that's hired by the district?
Correct. She works directly with the Hispanic community, so as an outreach service. I can't give you a
Yeah,
whole
no.
lot more detail.
Yeah, I have no idea what that person is.
That person has actually been a very integrated part of our bilingual program in general.
Maria Peters.
Peterson, yes. And hate to single out a person, but that's the easiest way for us to talk about this. And Maria Peterson has been,
Maria
Peters.
Peters.
Peters, I'm sorry. She has played a really significant role in the communication side of things, making sure questions are answered, resources are hooked up together so that if students are having issues, families have issues, she's kind of that primary liaison between our families, our Hispanic families, and the district. Todd, you might want to toss in a few more comments or
Well,
Lori on some of the
previously we
day-to-day.
were using some of our district psychologists and social workers who were able to speak Spanish. And unfortunately, that's a very expensive way to go, so this is far more efficient when you figure that approximately 32% of our student population now is a minority population. So trying to get to these families and work with the families and making sure they're getting to the right school or even getting to school and those kind of things. This was a more cost-effective way of doing it.
And I've actually gotten some feedback from our families who have, benefited by knowing Maria and Peters and benefiting from the services, that are her responsibilities. And they've all been positive, I'd like to pass on. So, and I don't know if you've gotten any communications or not, but from my perspective, she's done an excellent job and has played a critical role within our district and in this area.
She's very involved in our bilingual program. And
Right, and-
that's what I have.
That's all?
That's all.
Well, thank you, Lori. It's a lot for you and your team to pull this together, I know. It's part of what you do, but one of the more difficult aspects of this is there are some aspects, or some times where you have to pull out the crystal ball and you have to figure out those assumptions. And thank you for going through those with us. We know things will tighten up over time as we get more information from the appropriate sources. But thank you for the details, pulling this together, and we will have at it again each of the next few months. It's a big process.
Next month, we would be looking at setting a public hearing date and releasing a budget for the public to look at.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, thank you for that.
Good job.
And do we have a need for a closed session at all?
We do
We're
not.
And we're not scheduled for one, so. All right, thank you, everybody. Our meeting is adjourned.